As a young professional, my ego was way too fragile, and I wasn't really good at like taking feedback. I would listen to it, but I had a hard time not taking it personally.
Welcome to Becoming Better with Jeff Ponders. We deal with who we are, where we've been, where we're going, and who we're becoming to get there. It's time to leave your ego at the door and deal with real life. It's time to become better. So first of all, Matt, thank you so much for being on the Be Better podcast. It's really cool to have you here. I grew up in this home. We moved here when I was 1. And so literally all of my, I have like one memory before we moved here, which is crazy to actually have that memory. But all of my memories growing up stem from this house, and who I am and who I'm becoming is rooted here. So I got my friends here. Yay.
That's so cool. It's, I bounced around to a couple different homes growing up. And so it's hard for me. There are a few buildings that I can walk into without somebody calling the police that I could feel that sense of nostalgia. You know what I mean?
I mean, man, it's funny. Just knowing you, I can't imagine anybody calling the police on you, maybe for you, or to help you cover something up because you have enough friends out there.
Yeah. Who are you? I grew up here. I just want to come back and see what's going on, and maybe have some nostalgia. But no, it's okay. Don't call 911.
Please don't call the people.
I won't. I don't mean any harm.
Yeah, but I also imagine that you might come in you might be mildly suited or booted. Maybe actually no. Even if you came in like this, it's like, where's your ski gear?
Something like that. But no, it's a pleasure, Jeff. I think the world of you. I'm excited for this series that you're working on and being here in your childhood home. It's really, really cool.
Cool, man. So just a little bit about you. So the Matt Rawling that I know is an entrepreneur, an educator, an operator, an accountant, a board advisor, one of the most connected people in the Metro Detroit area. Pretty much if Matt Rawling's name is attached to it, you should probably pay attention. I'd love to hear from you. Like, who are you today? What's going on in your world?
Oh boy, that's really nice for you to say that, because I look back on the last 12 months and like most people, it's been a lot of anxiety and worrying about the future, and I think all of us are really, wherever you are, right? If things are going amazing or you're struggling, you're having these deep conversations with yourself about who you are. And for me, I'm like you, a huge extrovert. And so the last 12 months have been really difficult. And so I really, instead of, painting or hiking or reading books, I just rolled up my sleeves and did as much crazy shit as I I mean that. Like I would try to do, anytime somebody asked me to do something interesting, I would go out of my way to say yes, which I know is sometimes, frowned upon. A lot of successful people say you've got, it's all about learning to say no, and you've got to narrow your focus. But I just had so much, especially when the pandemic first started to hit, I felt very guilty that there was so much destruction and death, and that I was kind of sitting in my yuppie palace, just kind of, in the relative safety and comfort. And so, I tried to do, I myself and a couple other folks in Detroit, we'd start to do live stream for small business. We raised some money for some causes that I felt were important. And then I came up with this passion project of Professor X, which is just trying to, it's basically a letter to my 23, 24-year-old self about how I could have a better relationship with money, And then at work, I work at Wayne State, and we're busy trying to help support our faculty and students so that they can, bring their inventions to the world or their ideas to the world. So
it literally sounds like your entire world is around helping people, which is all. But I think that's amazing, man. as we think about what's happened over the last, has it been a year? Has it been like 5? I don't know. I'm kind of lost in the vortex right now.
I'm just rounding up, like
so like 20 years of a pandemic.
It's been somebody said it was the fastest, slowest year ever, and it's so true. But yeah,
no, it's funny you say that, man. I'm just looking at this year, as so many people, all of us being at least relatively sheltered in place, if for no other reason that we can't go, the places that we'd otherwise go and do things are shut down. We were forced to look in the mirror a lot, or look at YouTube and Netflix. Pick your screen, if you will. It's one. You've got these different schools of thought. Some folks are saying, if you don't come out of the pandemic with a business, you're not doing enough. You other folks saying, hey, just love yourself. And it's interesting to see you with a different, it sounds like a different perspective, which is not how can I build something new necessarily, even though you did, or how can I take care of myself, even though you did. It was, how can I help more people? Especially, not being a frontline worker per se, like you're not working in a hospital. You're an educator, but it wasn't necessarily working with K through 12, right? You're working with university folks, and even in a different position in this case. I think it's admirable that you took advantage of this time to not sit in the yuppie palace, which is hilarious, but to be proactive about finding ways to help people. So I'd love to hear where this altruistic side of you came from. Like, as a family, when you were growing up, were you giving a lot, or were you guys supporting causes? Where did this come from? How did you become the Matt Raleigh?
I guess here we are sitting in the home you grew up in. I mean, we're all kind of products of our environment to a degree, and my mom. I mean, we didn't have an extravagant home. We grew up in kind of a rural part of Wisconsin, and she just had, my mom especially. My dad maybe not so much. He was a little more maybe had a casual relationship with morality. But my mom had a really highly developed sense of right and wrong. And so anytime that we would be reading or learning about things in school and we would talk about them, she would have a very strong opinions about what was right and what was wrong. And so I think as I kind of embarked on my career, and I remember when I told her that I was studying to be an accountant, and she started crying. And she said, I really thought you were going to be an artist or an architect. And I'm like, I just want to put food on the table. What's the problem, But I mean, and we didn't even have money. So it was kind of I think that just was kind of a emblematic of like how she viewed the world.
Wait, those are sorrowful tears. They weren't happy tears.
Those were not happy tears.
Word.
Yeah. She was disappointed. She thought that I could have been this great creative person, and I'm not saying I can't, but she got over it quickly. It wasn't something, it didn't make Thanksgiving awkward, but as soon as I started to kind of have gotten to the point in my career where I was making a good living and everything, she would be very, we all want to make our parents proud. Yeah. And then as I started to kind of do good things, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out that coming of age in Detroit, where I think it's hard not to see the city as something bigger than yourself. One of my best friends from high school, he moved to the Bay Area, and I'd visit him and his partner, and they would go to brunch in beautiful places and walk in beautiful places, and everything was perfect and pristine, and all of the world's problems were an abstraction that was kind of tucked away in a corner of San Francisco, And so there was nothing. I would go visit them and I'd say, "Wow, there's nothing to fix. Like nothing needs to be better here in San Francisco. Everything's perfect." And so I think in Detroit, if you're here, if you've been in the city the last 10, 20 years, you kind of can't help but try and make it a better place. And so I've certainly been inspired by my friends and peers here in Detroit and all the amazing things that they've done.
That's awesome, man. So growing up in Wisconsin, visiting your friend in the Bay, how did you end up landing from Wisconsin where those shameful Packers play?
They are, man. That loss tore my heart out. It's like Aaron Rodgers finally with the showdown with Tom Brady can't beat the 43-year-old.
You can't. And growing up in Detroit and being a Wolverine fan my entire life, thanks, Dad. Seeing Tom Brady take down the Packers. Only thing that would have been better if it had been the Lions beating the Packers, but we just can't seem to get that right now. That's another conversation. We're gonna talk about being better with the Lions one day. But how did you land in Detroit, coming from Wisconsin? I can just imagine you had a bunch of angst and knots in your stomach.
No, not at all.
Coming to Lions Den.
I just told this story to somebody the other day. I mean, growing up in Wisconsin, you are just pumped full of pride. It's not founded, but it's just part and parcel with growing up there. We have Harley Davidson, this great biking culture. We have cheese, the Packers,
great cheese.
There's a lot of people just have a lot of pride, in place in Wisconsin. And I moved to Michigan to work after I worked at General Motors as an intern in college, and then I decided to come here full time. And I came here, and again, this is a while ago, and people are just looking at me like, why did you come here? This place sucks. Like, why are you here? Why did you come here? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like Wisconsin, but there's more diversity, and it's prettier, and it's a larger, more interesting economy. It's made more interesting cultural contributions to planet Earth, like pizza, bowling, Motown, techno. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I think the Republican Party came from Wisconsin, and that's about it. But and some amazing cheese. But so
cheese.
It was, and I loved the history. Like, Detroit has history is so complex, and there's a lot of scar tissue, obviously, but there's also a lot of humility, I think, in Metro Detroit that I think is really attractive, that you don't get in other major cities in the U.S. And so that was something that always resonated with me.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate your ability to look at the larger picture and consider the flowers versus the thorns that exist in the garden. It's funny when I think about Detroit and being a native Detroiter. I spent time in Philadelphia for college, and I came back with the idea of helping Detroit be better and building career and family here. But the conversation about Detroit is often filled with the pangs of the city, whether it's about the leadership or lack thereof in some cases. It's about the economy. It's always about these things that have gone wrong. And Detroit's a beautiful city with a rich, valuable, just gorgeous history, if you will. But it's easy to come back to a lot of mistakes that have happened. I want to get a little personal. I want to hear about the biggest mistake in your life.
The biggest mistake in my life?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I will tell you about, there's, and if this doesn't satisfy you, you can dig deeper. But I would say that there's a mindset that haunted me from basically my childhood to just up until about 2 or 3 years ago. And it's hard for me to admit, which is part of the problem. And I was good at faking it, but I hated feedback. I hated it. I hated it so much. I thought like I would kind of just nod, swallow my pride. I would kind of just roll with the punches. But kind of in college or as a young professional, I had my ego was way too fragile, and I wasn't really good at like taking feedback. I would listen to it, but I had a hard time not taking it personally.
Really?
100%. It's like in the last 3 years, I've had a lot of life events that have changed. Probably I was talking to a colleague probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and he said something to me that I'll never ever forget. And he said, when somebody says something to us that we don't like, and it kind of, some feedback, and if it hurts us inside, that's nature's way of telling us that we think it might be true.
Yeah. I love that concept. It's funny because, so my parents, we're in my mom's house, my mom and dad's house, and my parents would always tell me, like, don't get into fights. You remember growing up in school, somebody said, your mama's stupid. And somebody's like, what? Don't talk about my mama. I'm ready to fight you now. And so they would say, don't get into a fight because somebody calls me a name or calls you a name. You say your mom's a B. It's like, don't fight because of that. Say, what if they said your mom's a door? Is your mom a door? No, she's not a door. Does that sound stupid? Yeah, it sounds stupid. Why are you gonna fight over something stupid? But the message in that was this idea of, if it's not true, it's not worth the additional energy and risk and danger that involves, tackling it. And so the idea of, like, I can think back to personal experiences, whether over the last 3 months or the last 3 years of, that knot. And it's true. It's when we find ourselves facing uncomfortable truths or just uncomfortable possibilities that we don't necessarily want to go investigate with the fear of finding out that they are true. That crap sucks. But the flip side is, and I'd love to, personally, my experience has been that when I've tackled those things, I slept better at night. It wasn't that it was easy, but I found not only peace, but I found that I was growing because I was able to actually deal with the things that were real and potentially holding me back. So how did you actually, recognizing this angst about feedback, the anxiety that it caused? It was a good answer, by the way. What? How did you actually come to conquer that demon?
I put myself in a situation where I had no choice but to conquer it. And, that was taking over a basically almost defunct startup in the Quicken Loans empire. And when you're, as you know, when you're in that, entrepreneurial situation, for starters, feedback is critical. Yeah. It's everything, because you need people to be telling you what's right and wrong. But then, you're kind of faced with it every day, because time is of the essence when you're trying to build something, and so you can't kind of go through the mollycoddling or the political, like, you can't. Sometimes you can give feedback that over a long duration of time, right? And you kind of like leave a trail of breadcrumbs, or people leave you a trail of breadcrumbs, because it's, you're working at a large company and it's going to be around for a long time. You're going to be working together for a while, and you can kind of like slow play it. But when you're in a startup or organization that's growing quickly, you can't afford. You don't have that luxury.
Not at all, man.
And so, there was this company had a couple $1 million in preferred debt. I mean, it was on the cap table was underwater. The capitalization table was underwater. It would have been one hell of a thing if I'd pulled it off. And I certainly made a ton of mistakes along the way that contributed to it dying. But then, I had this moment in 2018 where, within the span of a month, I turn off the lights on this company and I help the 7 employees go find new jobs. And the board, we put about $500,000 in fresh capital into it, and it was all going away. And then I also had my mom pass from breast cancer within like a month. And I'm just like, you know what? There's nothing that somebody could say. There's nothing that could happen in the world that could trump the pain, the professional and emotional the pain of these two events happening so close together. Like, there's nothing anyone can do or say that can hurt me, at this point. And so it was kind of, I had these events that just forced me into a place where criticism was just something I could take in a way that I really, 10 years before, I wouldn't have been able to deal with.
Man, that's a really powerful, it's not, I don't want to call it a set of circumstances. It's a powerful moment in life. We talk about the idea of rock bottom. It's funny, I'm doing my Matt Rowling hands right now. We talk about rock bottom, and rock bottom looks like very different things for a lot of people. And it sounds like that might have been a rock bottom for you. My company failed. I lost my mom, which, to me, that's one of the scariest things in the world. Like, it's, it's generally speaking, it's inevitable, but, and to have them happen practically in the same breath, it's hard.
Well, and it was, I'd been the Rock Quicken Company for about 6 or 7 years, and it, for your listeners that aren't from Detroit, it's kind of the glamorous place to be. And so it was almost like I had this naked moment where I'm like, well, I'm going to see who my friends are now, because you've had these tremendous things that happen, boom, boom, one after the other. Your happiness is an inside job, and so you learn, you kind of come back to that baseline, and you rather quickly, and you're resilient, and so I think in the storytelling that you'd like to do, I think resiliency is really a critical message, because it's that ability to bounce back from those, because all those things happen to everyone all the time. If you're lucky, your parents pass before you do.
Right.
If you're lucky, you get to bury your parents. As ridiculous as it sounds.
And no, not at all. Because the flip side is, as a parent, I've got 3. As much as it's scary to lose my mom, I can't even imagine losing one of my kids, man. Like,
you would never. There is nothing in planet Earth that would ever make you make that trade.
Absolutely not. And that's one. It's like you don't want to ever have to choose either. But
yeah, but it's that is how you want it to play out.
Absolutely right. As I think about that moment for you, I love to hear about. I love that you identify this resilience, and the idea that it can't really get worse than this. This sucks, and it can't. I mean, I'm sure if we decided to play imagination, we could find some things that would make it worse, but it can't really get worse than that. I mean, it's stripping. It's a stripping away. You call it naked. It's funny in the book, the book Better that we're writing. We talk about the moment where you stand naked in front of the mirror, not literally, sometimes literally, but where everything's been stripped away from you. What happened in that moment for you as personal tragedy, professional tragedy, and you're just looking at yourself? I mean, you called your friends, but friends aside, you just looked at Matt and you say, what were you saying to yourself as you just literally looked at yourself in the ashes?
I've had this conversation with a few of my friends that have lost parents, and they seem to agree with this. This is a half-baked theory, but one of the and every person's relationship with their parents is unique, and it's hard. I don't mean to cast a big blanket across everyone's relationships, but what I've experienced with the death of my parents, is that death has this really wonderful ability to make you forget all of the things about somebody that you didn't like. And so for me, when I think about my dad and I think about my mom, it's like when death just kind of washes away, washed away a lot of the petty squabbles, or the I can't believe they did this or that or whatever. And so it's given me like a nice, like I only have fond memories of both of them. And on top of that, with my dad, after my mom passed, he passed when I was probably 27, and took a trip to Iceland, went with a friend and just kind of drove around. It's a beautiful place. And I was thinking about my dad, and I always thought of my dad as kind of a loser, because he wasn't commercially successful. He was a very smart, charming guy that never did shit. Like, he was always somebody who was like full of big ideas that never petered out. But the thing I didn't see, and it was like literally 10 years after he passed, I had this moment where I was like, that guy, before I was born, and I never saw it, he quit drinking, and he had a problem, like crashing cars, getting thrown in jail. Like, he had a problem. I'm not talking like, dry January or whatever the people are doing these days. And so I think of, and he came from an environment where he saw that every day with his dad. And so I said, you know what, this dude like did something special. He prevented three kids from growing up in that same environment. And so I think the first thing, to answer your question, in that moment, the first thing I did is I had this kind of magical coming to terms with both of my parents. It was like the end of the story. It's like I read to the end of the story for their lives, and I was like, you know what? These were really good people that did their best. And that kind of gave me the freedom to like be alone.
You probably can't see the mist dancing in my eyes here, because I'm not willing to cry on camera today.
I won't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
They won't see it. They won't see it, Jeff. It's a podcast.
No, it's really interesting. I can share a lot of, I'm not lost my parents to date. But I understand the sentiment. And I don't, it's interesting even how you looked at them and how, in your own experience in coming to terms with the reality, it was about you, but it's also about them, and, effectively putting a capstone on a story.
100%.
And it's a beautiful idea. One of the things we talk about a lot, isn't that in the mirror moment, that moment's really about acceptance, and it's being able to look at it in an entire story. Like I think about it as an individual, in this case, looking at your parents, but it's, true with you, me, and anybody listening or watching. Right now is literally a bookend for the story that's preceded us. And being able to look, and just like you do with your parents, and say, I see the end of the story, or at least this moment right now, and I can look back and say, here's the rest of it, and find an acceptable definition, acceptable meaning with the story that is at this moment, and find the beauty in it. I think that's one, it's a really healthy thing to do. It can also be a very hard thing. Example, a lot of times it doesn't happen until we find ourselves closing chapters or closing books, whether it's relationships or jobs, literally people in some cases. I think it's interesting to be able to do it with ourselves though too. Like Matt Rawling today, this is your book. This is the bookend from everything that happened before. And I know you well enough to know I think you like yourself most of the time.
Most of the time. Yeah. It's I'm still, when you're kind of a type A personality, I think you feel like, what's the Lord's Prayer? Accept the things you can't change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? That wisdom to know the difference, I think, for type A personalities can be a very difficult bridge to cross.
Yeah.
And so, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so I think it's hard to sometimes kind of allow yourself the freedom to not do certain things, which I clearly struggle with. So
I'm raising my hand. I'm in that camp too.
Yeah.
It's interesting, it's interesting being a person who has a ton of capacity. And honestly, I think everybody has a lot of capacity, but accepting that with all the things that we're capable of, we can't do everything that is possible with that capability, just based on, if nothing else, just the confines of time and resources. But acceptance being a really, really powerful word. So let me take you from acceptance to, let me give you a new word, hope and aspiration. So we talked about acceptance with parents and yourself and the journey that you've been on. Tell me a little bit about, about where you're headed. In fact, I'll give you the question like this. So today is the youngest that you'll ever be. Today is the youngest you'll ever be. Again, who do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I picture like a really rakish, rugged old man that drives a vintage Jaguar and has a home somewhere where there's like tall grass and like a sea breeze. And he has like kind of fun hobbies, like he paints or gardens or something, and a hot wife. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
And that may or may not be available depending on when you watch this.
Right? But no, I don't know. It's like I think you have to be being a human being. I think you have to be, even the cynics, I think secretly deep down inside they're optimists, because it's just, I can't imagine waking up and not thinking that it's going to be better tomorrow. Who do I want to be when I grow up? Oh boy, Jeff. I've never been a good, believe it or not. I mean, I'm a for like the next 6 months, for the next 6 hours, and the next 6 days, and the next 6 months, my life is like locked down, you know. But beyond that, it starts to get a little fuzzy. You know, when I try to teach people about money, one of the things that I always try to impart is this creating empathy for your future self, and I try to suggest that people have conversations with your future self, and you say, hey, you know, 60-year-old Matt, you know, 55-year-old Jeff, what do you want me to do, right? And that person grabs you by the collar and says, you know, stop eating and drinking so much and save more money, God damn it. You know, and you should really see a therapist about that hip thing, because that's going to be bad in 20 years, you know? So like, you know, it's so I think, you know, if you're focused, you know, the number one rule is healthy mind, healthy body, and then everything else kind of takes care of itself. I know that's a boring answer, but
that's a really boring answer.
I know.
I don't even know if I'm gonna let you off the hook on it.
You don't have to. You can.
I mean, you know, I won't if I don't choose to. So for what it's worth, I think the first part of the answer was fun, which is the rugged guy. That means we're gonna play a little less tennis and do more weightlifting.
No. That's a good point. Like it's. I'm not sure if it's LL Bean or Lacoste. I think it depends on the season.
That's fair. And you can grow a great beard, so you can do the whole salt and pepper thing. That's cool. You got good hair. I don't think you're losing your hairline. No, you're doing okay. You're holding on pretty strong here.
I'm searching for wood to knock on.
Yep, it's all around. You can knock on the floor here. But we talked a lot about the half stuff, which is cool. Like, hey, like the hot wife, everybody wants a hot wife or husband, depending on where you're coming from. Cool. You know, the house, like we talked about a lot of the half stuff and healthy mind, healthy body, general states of being. But who do you want to be? Like what type of thoughts do you want to think? What kind of decisions do you want to be making when you are that guy down there?
Well, I mean, at that point, I'd like to really just kind of, I think, you know, it takes a lot of energy to do, you know, I think about like, you know, Madonna and Mickey Mantle and the Elon Musk and the Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali. Like,
hold on. I want you to list those people again. That was like the craziest list ever. You said
I'm going somewhere.
Mickey Mantle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's an old reference, old school reference.
Yeah.
But like, I think one of the you see these. Everyone wants to be rich and famous, and they don't really realize the amount of time and energy and dedication. You know, Kobe Bryant, right? How many free throws did that guy shoot in his life? You know,
about 25 million.
25 million, right? Like it's like there's just so much energy that goes into making things better or being the best, and so I'd like to think at some point can not be as obsessed. I'm not trying to draw a comparison with any of those people, but I'm trying to say that when you're trying to do a lot of great things, it takes a lot of energy, and so I hope I can kind of like relax. I hope I can relax and enjoy, you know, the last couple decades of my life and just like chill the heck out, you know, and so that's my answer to your question. But if you want something a little more concrete, I think I've always, when I look back at the things that have given me the most pleasure in my life, it's always been working with a small group of people that I really like on something that really positively impacts society, you know, and so. And I've had a couple of those moments, and they've, you know, rarely been compensated, and they've been just filled me with a ton of joy and fulfillment. And I hope I get to do a lot more of that stuff before I die.
Man, I love that. So, I mean, that actually completely sounds like the person that you are today.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, it's a little less, you know, these days it's over Zoom, and, you know, I'm not wearing nice pants, but, you know, like it's, you know, it's, but yeah, I mean, I feel very fulfilled in the work that I do. Yeah. And so I don't want, you know, I was joking with you off camera about how I was on a fancy person meeting this morning, and I had my video turned off because I didn't feel like I had to and it was I didn't feel compelled to. I'm not aspiring to anything higher. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not. You know, I don't know if that sounds good or not.
No. So I think one of the most powerful places to be is exactly where you are, and being happy, being the person that you are. Like I'm consumed with this idea of what am I thinking about, what am I saying, what am I doing, and if I'm thinking, speaking, and doing the things that are in line with the person that I desire to be, if I'm doing those things today, it's not about what more is there to do. It's just keep doing it, and being able to ride that idea of I'm being who I'm supposed to be, therefore I'm going to go where I'm supposed to go. And I'll be able to do the things I'm supposed to do because I'm really good with who I am. So I think it's beautiful to be, I mean, a good friend of mine, actually a client would call it walking in authenticity.
Yeah. And I think that's what we all, you and I have talked before about this concept of like the mask or game face. Yeah. And I know, and that is a really, that whole concept is fraught. There's a lot there, right? Especially if you are underrepresented in mainstream society, it can be a lot. But I think when we're all striving to kind of get to a place where, the defensive side of it is that we don't care It's not that we don't care what happens, but we're comfortable with any outcome. And then the offensive side of that is that then we can really be focused on delivering value for everyone else, and we can, see the focus on the mission and the vision and all that kind of good stuff. And that gives you the ability to say to yourself, well, there might come a day where the vision of this and the mission of this is no longer includes me, Right. And then when you can really kind of get to that point, then you're operating at a really high level.
I love that idea, man. And I think was kind of the secret that's hidden in there is this idea that when we operate at our highest capacity, when we operate with authenticity, we are being who we're supposed to be. It also unlocks others' ability to do the same. And you don't think you necessarily said it like this, but if it's I'm operating within an organization and now they don't need me anymore, that's because you've empowered them to become better, where the role that you were in is fulfilled. And I think, what I found to be true also is that when you are able to go into those spaces and operate with authenticity, it gives other people permission to do the same thing. It's almost like, it's like being in class and waiting for somebody to ask the first question. And now you feel free enough to take a risk. So I think that's really cool, man. I got a couple more questions for you. I appreciate your time, man. We always have fun hanging out. So, man, you brought my mom coffee. This is the kind of guy Matt is. He brings coffee to people's moms. So if he's still single right now, he might bring your mom coffee. Just saying. Oh boy. Anyway, let me not put the cattle call out here for this guy. So you so you talked about this present and the future of helping and working with teams of people that you enjoy being with and making substantive changes in the world, things that make a positive impact. So it's a kind of a two-point question. One, who are you feeling called and compelled to help? And then two, how can our listeners, how can we help you to help bring that positive change into the world?
Oh boy, that's awesome. I think, one time I was hanging out with a guy who worked at a foundation, and he said to me, if I gave you, $10 billion, what would you do with it? And I said, well, I'd take half of it and I'd come up with a Manhattan Project to solve the climate crisis, CO2 emissions, and I'd take the other half and I'd try to help, women in the developing world become fully catch up to their male counterparts when it comes to access, civil rights, et cetera. And so I still stand by that kind of, off the cuff, what I do with a couple $1 billion. But, I just this last in the United States of America right now, we're kind of, these are not new problems, but I think that the inequality that has just been exacerbated in this last 12 months. You know, the minimum wage in the United States of America is $7.25 a year. I'm sorry, an hour. And so that's about 14 grand a year.
I can't do anything with that.
The average cost of healthcare for a human being in the United States of America is about $8,000 or $9,000. Like, I don't, if I have not convinced you, there is nothing I could possibly say. Like, I don't even know, the average cost of automobile in the US is $8 grand, according to AAA. So you're 17 grand.
It's gone.
And you haven't even bought.
You have a place to live.
You don't have a place.
Food.
You don't have anything, right? Like,
no food. You don't have underwear.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, this is the wealthiest country in the history of human beings. Like, it is ridiculous.
Man.
And so I get so, you know, I get so frustrated by our basic inability to, like, people are literally dying in the streets of the United States of America. They have been forever, and there's just zero political will to kind of serve the least among us, you know, and in a country built on Christian values, and so I think I don't have an answer to it. I was listening to an interview with a woman who was doing research on the wealthy, and she said two things that really struck me. She said that, number one, most wealthy people in America don't think they're wealthy, and because we're at the mercy of our peer group, right? And so if you're in Manhattan or Grosse Pointe or, you know, the Gold Coast in Chicago, and you're only worth $5 million, you probably feel like you're not that wealthy, right? Meanwhile, $5 million is 50 times the net worth of the average American, right? But the other thing she said was, because wealthy people see a lack of social safety nets in the United States of America, they're less likely to part with their money, because they're going to hoard it a little bit more, because they know what it's like to not have money in the United States of America. And so my message to all of your listeners is that, you know, it doesn't take much to win the game. You know, like, if you're making, you know, you don't have to wait, you know, be honest with yourself about who you are. You know, it's, you know, it doesn't take much money to, like, pay for the basic things that you need to live. And once you've kind of met that amount, whatever, and you know, it's a personal decision, but, you know, there's no fun being the richest guy in the graveyard, or gal. And so if you can either through advocacy or the ballot box or just your own charity, you know, it's never too soon to start helping other people. And however you feel comfortable, whatever platform or dimension you feel comfortable doing that. But don't lie to yourself about who you are. You know, if you're making $250,000 a year or more, or whatever the number is, like, it doesn't take much. The average household income in America is about 45, 50 grand. So, you know, don't kid yourself about who you are, and don't tell yourself little lies about you're not wealthy, even though just because your neighbor has a bigger car than you. You're rich. You know, if you're rich, if you've got means, you know, don't lie to yourself and go help others. Go find a way. I don't care. Even if it's a guy on the street and he needs $20, just give the guy on the street $20. It's fine. It's fine. Even if he spends it, he could spend it. He could turn around, walk in the liquor store and buy a fifth. And you know what? You made his day a little better. Okay. Like, FUCK it. Who cares? Like, let the man have a drink.
I think we can spell that.
I mean that. Like, just like whatever way you feel comfortable giving, give, and don't kid yourself about who you are if you have money.
Man, all right. I got. So I have one more question, but I got it. You said something that triggered me. You said lots of things that were triggering with that in a positive way. I can't remember if I was talking to my wife or maybe a therapist or something recently. And I was talking about entrepreneurship, and I've got I can soapbox for way too long about what entrepreneurship is all about. Like we soapbox on your podcast, which is awesome. Go listen to Personal Finance with Professor X. It is awesome. But this idea of entrepreneurship where we create things and then we release it, and we don't know how people are going to use the things that we create, but we have to be okay with recognizing that we were purposed to create that thing. And we can try to put safeguards up so that people don't do really, really bad things with it. But just like giving, you give, and the point is that you gave from a healthy, holy place, if you will. And you hope and leave it to God to hope that they will do positive things with the gift that you released. So I think it's really cool. All right, last question for you. You talked a lot about the question that it was supposed to be about what would you do with $10 billion? I love it. And your answer surprised me. I did not. I expected a whole bunch of other answers. I was like, oh, climate change is dope though, by the way. That makes sense.
I mean, all the progress in the world doesn't mean much if we can't live here in 2 generations.
Facts.
So, it's talk about having empathy for your future self.
I love it. That's the answer you gave though. It's a rich answer. It's a mature answer. And I'm curious, who are the people, the voices that help you raise your bar, raise your consciousness, raise your level of thinking?
I mean, we all need a cabinet of advisors, and that can tell it to you like it is, or help you, inspire you. I mean, Carla Walker Miller, who's founded an energy services company here in Detroit. I always, once every month or two, we'll go for a walk, and she'll be like, "Oh, I didn't let anybody go at work, and everyone's making $15 an hour, and blah blah blah." She just kind of personifies servant leadership for me, and so I've been, I consider her a really good friend and someone who's inspired me. When I did work at Rock and Ventures and Quicken, I would see some of the most talented business people in, planet Earth, and they were just so. That kind of flow, that detachment, that objectivity that you see, that was always super inspiring. But and then I have friends that are kind of do-gooders that up my game and encourage and inspire me, and like you and my friend Angelic, who I don't know if she works at Ford. She's always been somebody who's pushed me. So I think you do have to, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you spend time with people that, are, you want to find people that you can model their behavior and that they inspire you, because we are at the mercy of our environment.
That is a sermon all within itself. So this right here, I want to put this somewhere because I think it's fun. I need the story behind your Casio watch.
What's the story behind this Casio watch? Yeah. What's wrong with what's the story behind it?
So, from the man who lives in its self-proclaimed yuppie palace.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like okay, what's your question? I
want the story behind the watch.
Yep. What's the question what the story behind the watch? The story behind the watch is that it tells time. It goes with a lot of different outfits, and I think it cost maybe like $50 or something like that. So that's the story behind the watch. That's it? That's it. That is literally it. I wish I had a better story for you. Like, is there a different way you'd like to ask the question?
Let me see if I can know what a different way to frame it. First of all, I think the answer that you gave, given the story that you've already told, it speaks to your breadth for what it's worth. Like here's a person who has global empathy, who has walked through a series of lives. It
was probably made at a sweatshop, Jeff. Let's be honest. I'm wearing it so that I can ceremonially burn it in the street as a rebuke of slave labor or slave wages in the developing world. I think it was probably made in China. Who knows? One of my last like personal finance tip. You have to play the opportunity cost game. And so here's how the opportunity cost game is played. I want a Rolex watch. Rolex watch that I want is $15,000. So the genie appears, says, "Great news, Matt. Your lucky day." He even sounds like Robin Williams, rest in peace. And the genie says, "Hey, I'll give you the Rolex watch of your dreams, or I'll give you 15. Oh, and let's not forget the sales tax, so that's another $900. So is that right? 6% of 15,000? Yeah, that's $900. You're paying $900 in sales tax for a watch. Well, give me a break." So, and then genie's like, "Okay, or you can have 16,000 or $16,000
Tax free?
tax free."
What?
Because it's after tax money that you're using to buy the watch.
True.
Right? So it has to be tax free in order for it to be apples to apples. So I have always preferred the cash. So and I think people, need to, if you have your healthcare and education taken care of, you don't, in most US cities, you don't really need a lot to pay the bills, if you got some of the big ticket stuff taken care of. And so I'd rather, use that money for other stuff.
That was a fantastic answer. That was good. You it's not even off the hook. You answered it well. How about that? So Matt, man, I thank you, friend, for being here. I appreciate your time and your candor. How can we follow you? How can we continue to support who you are and what you're up to? Yeah, no, I'm a YouTuber now. I don't know if you heard about that. What's YouTube? YouTube, it's a place where your vanity projects can come to life. I thought it was a band, U2, right? U2? Oh, that is a band. That is an amazing band. Okay. Actually, I spent most of my early teen years listening to U2. I have a channel, Personal Finance with Professor X. I try to really focus on helping people have a healthy relationship with their money, so that it can, demystify it, make it easier for people to understand it's a tool and use it to build their own wealth. So please go to Professor X, Personal Finance with Professor X, and subscribe and let me know what you think. Awesome. Well, Matt, it's been a pleasure. We'll hang out and probably have more fun off camera than on, even though on camera was awesome. You owe me a tennis match. Dude, I'm on jeans right now, but I'm ready. Matter of fact, I have everything I need upstairs. So we'll play. So we might capture some of it on camera. I haven't played in 4 years though. So I need about 2-3 games to just knock some rust off. It's all right. It's all good. I haven't played in a couple since the fall. So I'm shut up. Some of fall. I haven't played since it was warm out. My mom probably has some trophies around here somewhere.